Okay, I've got a question for you. And even though there is a right answer, as is typical, I don't want you to answer out loud, and I won't be calling on you, so no pressure. The question is, what are the 3 greatest gifts you've ever received? Now, I'm sure you received a lot more than 3 gifts, but I want you to pick the 3 that are the absolutely most significant, the most substantial, those that should mean more to you than anything else. What would those gifts be? Well, even though I know some of you better than I know others, I know the greatest gift each one of you has ever received, that being your very self. Now, that you and I exist is the first and the greatest of all the gifts. Now, you might think that that was a trick question. Existence is a given, right? But is it really? None of us had to be. God is the only necessary being, for being itself comes from Him. And He is complete in Himself. He didn't create you or me because He was lonely or bored or anything else. That you and I are truly is a gift. The second most important gift you and I have received is God's love. You and I are the recipient of undeserved love from the God of the universe. And that's no small gift. But too often, sadly, God's love for us is an unrequited love, a love that's not returned. For how many of us come close to loving Him as we should? Jesus said, the first and the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind. And since God does not command the impossible, the grace is there for us to do so, and yet how many of us do? And while not directly related to the topic at hand, here's something else to consider in that regard. If loving God with all our heart is the greatest commandment, wouldn't the greatest sin be breaking the first and greatest commandment? And yet, how many of us consider this to be our greatest sin? Something to consider. The third greatest gift we have ever been given is the gift of faith. Not everyone receives it. The grace of being Catholic and having the fullness of faith is truly a gift. Pope Francis has said quite a bit about God's gifts. While granted to individuals, the Pope said, gifts are discovered and acknowledged within the wider ecclesial community. Gifts are meant to serve the building up of the church as a communion of faith and love. And further, Pope Francis held up the Blessed Virgin Mary as the most excellent example of how to use our gifts. Mary, the Pope said, was receptive but not passive. That is, she didn't keep her gifts to herself, for she knew she didn't receive them for her own sake. She took what she received and used it for the sake of others, thereby fulfilling the second commandment, that being love of neighbor. And there's not one of us here without gifts. Some gifts are external and obvious, like the gift of gab, for instance. Other gifts are like the gifts of the Holy Spirit, less obvious, but certainly more to be desired. Wisdom, understanding, counsel, knowledge, fortitude, piety, and fear of the Lord. Still others are what I would call latent gifts, meaning they're gifts we're not conscious of, but they become manifest through the grace of God in particular situations and perhaps only for a time. The gift of mercy, perhaps, to someone who has seriously wronged us. A gift of enduring suffering for the sake of the kingdom or of souls, or the gift of courage in the face of danger or persecution. Sergeant William Bright, a 16-year veteran of the Jackson, Mississippi Police Department, exhibited the gift of courage coupled with great compassion years ago when he encountered a man trapped in an SUV. It was on September 21st, 2015, when Bright came across the worst highway crash he'd ever seen. I noticed a truck down in the woods facing eastward with his lights on, Bright said. There was a man pinned inside alone. I got up in the vehicle with him, he said. Bright pulled at his arm, but he couldn't get him out. And as he was looking to see how he was pinned in, the vehicle caught on fire. The first emergency crews were on the scene, and Bright explained, we had gotten the fire extinguisher from their truck already, and I used that one up. They were up on the highway stopping traffic to get more fire extinguishers. 18-wheelers gave them theirs, but that was still not enough to put out the growing fire in the SUV. They desperately continued trying to get the man out, but couldn't. And ultimately, the flames drove all the rescuers away from the vehicle, except for Sergeant Bright. Bright said, I took him by the hand and told him I was going to be there with him until he died. There was nothing I could do, Bright said. They had a prayer right before the end. I'm sure we were both talking to the good Lord. I knew the truck could explode and would take me with it, but some things you just do. Bright explained further, I hated to get out and leave that man. I did everything I could to save him, but I'm still really feeling the weight of it. When you put this badge on, there's a lot more to being a police officer. First off, you have to love people, and I don't have a problem with that, Bright said. I think if St. Therese of Lisieux had known Sergeant Bright, she would have wanted to be like him. For her heart also aspired to greatness. In a letter to St. Marie of the Sacred Heart, she wrote of telling Jesus, should not being your spouse, being a Carmelite, and being in union with you, being the mother of souls, suffice for me? Yet, she wrote, I feel within me other vocations. I feel the vocation of warrior, priest, apostle, doctor, martyr. I feel the need and desire of carrying out the most heroic deeds for you, O Jesus. St. Therese wanted it all. Have you ever felt that way? I have. In my mind, I do the most noble and heroic things for God. And yet, sometimes when I'm given an opportunity to exercise even ordinary charity, I blow it. St. Therese identified with this too. "Oh, my Jesus," she wrote, "what is your answer to all my follies? Is there a soul more little, more powerless than mine? Yet in my weakness it has pleased you, O Lord, to grant my little childish desires." And it was at that point she discovered that her vocation, that her gift comprised all vocations. She could have it all because her vocation was love. And love is a vocation that embraces all times and places, an eternal gift. Her vocation of love was to become what we know as her little way. That little way, my brothers and sisters, is our vocation too. Our gifts, whether evident, hidden, or latent, are to be received and used in the service of others. That is the way of love. But it's not for us to choose whether we will love in great or small ways, whether our gifts will be noticed or not, whether our gifts will be appreciated or not. We can desire to do great things for God, but like the gift of contemplation, how our gift will be used is for God to decide. Our duty is to prepare, to be properly disposed to love and to be receptive. And we do that through St. Teresa's little way, doing small things with great love. This prepares, disposes, and makes us receptive to whatever way God chooses for us. Even more than that, St. Teresa's little way is greatness itself. Can we ever repay God for all the gifts we have been given? Yes. St. Teresa assures us love can be repaid, but that's only one way to do so. Love, this Carmelite doctor of the Church explains, is repaid by love alone.